What is up guys, welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and today I've got a $400 gaming PC build for your faces. You guys asked for more budget builds, so here I am trying to deliver. So get that like button truly smashed and do subscribe, it really does help me out. Before we jump into the parts I selected for this build, let's first take a look at some performance figures so you can get an idea of what gaming performance you can be expecting. Now the real sweet spot for this build for me comes at the 1080p medium settings area if you're willing to tone down anti-aliasing and VSync for example. Not only are you going to get some fantastic gaming experiences in Fortnite, CSGO, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, but also slightly more harder to run titles such as Overwatch. You're going to be seeing hopefully up to 60 frames per second in a lot of these games. I've also focused this build massively towards upgradability and future upgrade paths, future proofing, and I'll come onto that in a moment's time. Now, as always, I will link all the parts mentioned in the description below if you'd like to pick them up, as will I do so for my recommended peripherals for this build. If you're looking for a good keyboard or mouse or headset that goes nicely with a build of this caliber, you can find those down there as well. But now though, what parts go into this machine to really make it tick? Now, arguably the CPU/APU is the most important part in this PC build. I went for the AMD Ryzen 2400G. With a base clock of 3.6 and boost of 3.9 GHz, you get some decent single-threaded performance. And with this being a quad-core chip, the multi-threaded side of things is covered nicely, with many of the more up-to-date titles actually requiring a quad-core CPU, and this ticked that very box. Now this is actually an APU, and that differs slightly from a traditional CPU you'd find in higher end gaming builds. An APU actually combines your graphics and your CPU into a singular unit, and that does have some caveats which I'll come to in a moment's time. The AMD APU lineup are actually pretty remarkable. AMD have become so good at integrated graphics that they not only provide the solutions graphically for the PlayStation and the Xbox, both last and current generations, but they've also licensed their graphics technologies to Intel-level companies to use, and we didn't see that one coming a few years ago. With a low 65 watt TDP, fantastic included stock cooler with good upgrade leverage and a really attractive price point, which all set on the AM4 socket for fantastic upgrade paths, this is a really nice CPU to opt for. For the motherboard in this build, I selected the MSI B350M MORTAR. And now this is a really solid motherboard to go for. Not only is it going to seat our CPU in this build, but connect all of our other components nicely together. Crucially, this motherboard supports overclocking, which is going to give us the leverage to get some free extra performance out of our CPU, and perhaps more importantly in an APU build, supports not only dual channel memory, but has 4 RAM DIMM slots, and that is really key. Now, unlike a traditional graphics card which would have its own dedicated memory, an APU has to share the system memory, has to share the memory that's also used by the processor. Now this creates some challenges that I did allude to briefly earlier. Now it is crucial, it is utterly detrimental that in an APU build you have 2 or 4 RAM DIMMs. This is going to provide a far increased amount of bandwidth over a single RAM DIMM, which can double or even triple performance in games. I'm being completely serious. You go from 20 to 60 FPS in many of the latest titles. Now the key advantage of this motherboard then comes in with its 4 RAM DIMM slots, as you've got 2 spare slots free for upgrades later on down the line, which means you don't need to discard the kit you've already paid good money for, and you can just add to it instead, which is a big bonus. Now talking of the memory, what RAM did I select? I opted for 8GB of Corsair's Vengeance LPX in a 2x4GB DIMM configuration. Now this memory is really nice, it's superb value for money compared to other options on the market. It fits in really nicely with the build, it looks fantastic, and the near 3000 MHz speed, which can be overclocked further in the motherboard if you so desire, is nice and fast, which is once again going to aid your APU's performance. Now moving on to the storage in this build, for me there is only one option, there's only one choice. With a build at this lower price point, a 1TB hard drive from either Seagate or WD is the way to go. I opted for Seagate's Barracuda because it was the cheapest at the time of filming this video. With a 7200 RPM speed, it's as fast as mainstream hard drives get. A 3.5-inch form factor, which mounts nicely into the rear of this case. Good reliability, I've owned many of these. I've got like 4 4TB ones in my server and a HTPC. Literally, I've got these everywhere. Basically, they're affordable. 1000 gigs is quite a lot of room for games, movies and music, and whilst an SSD will provide faster boot up times later down the line, this isn't going to hamper your gaming performance in the slightest. For the penultimate part in this build for the case, I went for one of the most special chassis on the market right now. Unlike many uber budget builds, this case doesn't come from a no-name brand you've never heard of with crappy customer support. It comes from Coolermaster of all companies. It's one of the most basic designed cases I've ever seen, but one of the most clever. It actually utilises dust filters to form the bulk of its design. This allows for superb airflow, which limits the number of fans you need to get good temperatures, and makes this thing super cheap to produce and super cheap to buy. You also get a good front I/O with 2 USB 3 ports, power, reset, and headphone and microphone jacks, of course. We support for full-size standard ATX power supplies, graphics cards as well, and micro ATX motherboards. It literally nails the price to performance proposition in every single regard. We support for a couple of SSDs, a hard drive, really good cable management room with plenty of rear clearance. All in all, you can't go too far wrong with this case if I'm being honest. For the final part in today's build for the power supply, this one's really become a staple of my budget builds. With an 80+ white certification that guarantees efficiency of above 80% at all times, a 500 watt output, which is actually more than a lot of budget power supply options, a non-modular design of course, and a ridiculously cheap price tag, the Thermaltake Smart TR2S 500 watt, it's all around a fantastic unit. Not only is it small and compact, but it gives SATA, Molex, graphics card, CPU and motherboard power, so covers every base nice and sufficiently. It's just really cheap and nice and reliable, and you can't really ask for much more in a budget power supply unit. But that I think just about wraps it up for today's build. If you did enjoy it, smash that like button. You want to buy any of the parts, they will be linked in the description below. And as always, we'll see you in the next GeekaWhat video.